Now you can listen to Wine and Dine Radio while shopping at the grocery store or your neighborhood wine merchant. Wine and Dine Radio can be heard using your wireless internet on your cell phone. You're listening to iWineRadio. iWineRadio is a production of Food Tastes Better with Wine on the web at iWineRadio.com. Hey guys, I thank you for listening to iWineRadio, and we are still the only wine channel on iTunes Radio. If you go look under iTunes radio icon and scroll down to News and Talk Directory, and it's listed alphabetically, click on that and the stream comes up immediately. iWineRadio.com, where you can find links to individual guests. And if anyone's interested in advertising or becoming an underwriter or sponsor, please contact us at iWineRadio.com. We really, really appreciate your support. The more support we get, the more conversations I can have with fascinating people around the world, including you. If you have a story to tell that you'd like to share on iWine Radio, go to iWineRadio.com and contact us, and we'll go from there.
Hi, my name's Jay Youmans. I'm with the Capital Wine School in Washington, D.C. I'm a certified wine educator and a master of wine. You can hear more about our classes and learn more about our classes at www.capitalwineschool.com. Capital is spelled with an A-L, not an O-L. And thank you for having me.
I've had my eye for quite some time on Jay Youmans, certified wine educator, master of wine, to be a guest on Wine and Dine, and here we have a perfect excuse because he's also available. But let me start with giving you a little bit of background on him. For those of you, if you're not in the wine industry, you may not be familiar with his name, but if you're in the wine industry, you definitely know Jay Youmans, master of wine. He has been in the wine industry for nearly 30 years, and as he mentioned to me before we started recording, he kind of caught the bug as a student in the Raleigh area in Wake, and he owns a marketing company called Rock Creek Wine Merchants, and he is the founder of the Capital Wine School. He's based out of Washington, D.C. He's a certified Burgundy wine educator, an advanced level sommelier, and I already mentioned certified wine educator and master of wine. He is the 21st American to pass the MW exam. His dissertation was on cool climate viticulture. And he also won the Viña Errázuriz Award for an outstanding paper in his MW exams on the business of wine, which makes sense since one of his majors in college was business. And Jay's joining us today to talk about Chablis. He recently did and I'm not sure if it was a webinar or if it was a face-to-face class with people through the French Wine Society that was titled Chablis, Not Your Average Chardonnay. And there are still so many Americans who are not familiar with true Chablis, especially young Americans. And Jay, thank you so very much for joining us today. And let's start by asking how you're comparing not your average Chardonnay. So to some people listening that don't even realize Chablis is in fact Chardonnay.
That's correct. Well, thanks, Lynn, for having me. Chablis is a area within Burgundy, France, which you hear the name Burgundy and you think red wine, but the truth is Burgundy is predominantly white wine made from Chardonnay. The area, it's a geographic area. It's not a big area. It's really a small town in the northern part of the Burgundy region. And all they grow there is Chardonnay. But the French don't feel like putting the grape on the label is what's important. They put the geographic indication of where the grapes are grown. And Chablis is, the title of it was a webinar that I gave this week, and
okay.
And what really the Chardonnay really is indigenous and from France. It's from this area of Burgundy, and some people believe it's from this area called Chablis. And when I first got into the wine business years ago, you walked into a restaurant, you asked for a glass of Chablis. It was kind of a generic white wine. It could be made out of anything, any grape. But that name was kind of stolen from this little town in France, in Chablis, and all they grow there is Chardonnay. But it's a completely different style of Chardonnay than what most people are used to. Most people are used to Chardonnay that's kind of rich. It has a little touch of oak from the winemaking, some richer, buttery characteristics also from winemaking, and may even have a touch of sweetness. But Chablis is probably the truest expression of Chardonnay in that rarely do you taste oak in the wine, or any of these other winemaking techniques that are common in California. So
I
find it to be, if you were to taste most people on a typical Chablis, and then taste them side by side with, say, a California Central Coast Chardonnay, the wines taste completely different. In fact, most people would if you tasted them on these wines blind, where they didn't know the identity, they probably wouldn't even guess that Chablis is made from the Chardonnay grape.
Yeah. Your background in your comfort level, especially with respect to your dissertation with Master of Wine on cool climate viticulture, really plays well into this discussion about Chablis.
Yeah, absolutely. So cool climate viticulture is where, the way I defined it in my thesis paper was, this is any wine producing region in the world where grapes struggle to get ripe. It's right on the brink of maybe never getting completely ripe. And some of the flavor characteristics that you get out of grapes grown at these margins are pretty desirable to people, particularly in the style of the wine that they produce. With white wines produced in marginal climates, what we call cooler climates, or even cold climates, you tend to have a lot tartar style of white wine, and even the reds tend to be, well, the truth is, if you get into really cold wine-producing regions, you just can't get red grapes ripe. Probably the only red grape, or one of the only red grapes that you could get ripe in a seriously cold climate would be something like Pinot Noir.
How about Dornfelder, or, some of the things from Austria or Switzerland? Yeah,
I think, a lot of Austria is, especially in what we call the lower part of Austria,
is warm.
Burgundy. I'm sorry.
Is warm.
It's a lot. It is warmer, and I'm not sure I would classify those areas, particularly like Burgenland and some of those areas as being cool climate.
Okay.
Some of the areas in Austria, outside of Vienna, like the Wachau and Kamptal and other areas, they're cool, but they're not really cold.
Okay.
When I say cool climate, I'm talking about areas like the northern extremes of Germany, like in the Mosel and the Rheingau, and areas like in Canada, like in the Niagara Peninsula.
Okay.
And then the far extremes of the southern hemisphere, areas like parts of New Zealand, places like that. Yeah.
Okay. So many Americans are used to this oakiness in wine, or if it's a $10, $12 bottle of wine, sweetness in their Chardonnay.
Well, yeah, I don't want to get too technical, but let me just give you a quick rundown of how a typical Chardonnay from like $5 to $15 is typically made.
Okay.
So they would harvest the grapes, they would bring them into the winery, crush the fruit, and then you get rid of the skins, and you're fermenting just the juice. And this is very different from red wine, where you're fermenting the juice and the skins together. You would ferment Chardonnay juice, and for a lot of wines may be priced $15 and up. You might actually ferment that juice in oak barrels. And you might, after the fermentation's over, then you might age it in the barrels for a little longer. But a typical Chardonnay, a lot of the ones, $5 to $15, what they're going to do is they're going to ferment the wines in stainless steel, and they're going to actually put in like oak chips or staves to kind of give the wine the flavor of oak. And this is not a very popular notion for, to think that you're having somebody actually add oak, but it's done because that's what people like in the wine.
Yeah.
The other thing that gets commonly done with Chardonnay is that they allow a bacteria to affect the wine. You can either inoculate it or it'll happen on its own, but it's malolactic bacteria. And without getting too technical, basically the bacteria, it's harmless to humans, but what it does is it attacks the lactic acid in the wine. It attacks the malic acid and converts it into lactic acid, which is creamier and less tart. And that's what gives the wine a little bit more richness, Chardonnay. And then the third thing that goes on with these wines is that they might age on the dead yeast a little bit like champagne is produced. And the longer the dead yeast starts to decompose and gives off some of these buttery, almost like buttered popcorn kind of flavors. And finally, the fourth step that happens with Chardonnays in this price category is that you might even have some Chardonnay set aside or some other juice set aside as a sweetening agent that's unfermented, that's then added back to the wine to raise the sweetness level up a little bit. And this is done because people, in comparison to Chablis tends to be pretty dry. Most California Chardonnays have had a little sweetness, juice concentrate, something added back to give them a little sweet edge, because that's what people like. Yeah. So that's why stylistically, there's a big difference between what you see in this area of Chablis and what you typically see. And I'm not just picking on California. This approach to making Chardonnay that I just described happens everywhere in the world. It happens in the New World producing countries like Australia, New Zealand, Chile, Argentina, South Africa. A lot of these techniques I'm talking about, though, are actually illegal to use in an area like France.
Big difference. You have
Big difference, yeah.
If somebody we're almost out of time, Jay. I just want to say, if somebody wanted to come to start experimenting with Chablis, what kind of price range would they be looking at?
Well, that's Chablis is Chablis comes in like four levels of. I don't like to use the word quality, but there are kind of four levels of Chablis. There's what's called Petit Chablis, which tends to be the most simple, straightforward style of wine. They tend to be anywhere from $10 to $15. Then you have Basic Chablis, which is will have the word Chablis on the label, and you can buy those from about $15 to $25. Then you start getting into individual vineyards within Chablis, which have a little bit better exposure, a little better soil for getting grapes ripe, and those are what we call Premier Cru Chablis. Those cost anywhere from $25 to $50. And then, last but not least, is the highest level of Chablis, which is the Grand Cru Chablis, and really it's just one hillside, about 250 acres on this one hillside that's divided up into 7 different parcels, and this is called the Grand Cru. A wine produced from those vineyards is going to run anywhere from $50 to $150, and you don't have to get Grand Cru Chablis to get the best. I mean, you can spend $30, $35 and find the best expression of Chablis that's out there. So.
Jay Youmans, I would like to thank you so very much for joining us today on Wine and Dine to talk to us about Chablis compared to New World Chardonnay. You can learn more online at capitalwineschool.com. We'll have links up as well. Happy holidays, Jay.
You too, Lynn. Thank you so much.
Now you can listen to Wine and Dine Radio while shopping at the grocery store or your neighborhood wine merchant. Wine and Dine Radio can be heard using your wireless internet on your cell phone. You're listening to iWineRadio. iWineRadio is a production of Food Tastes Better with Wine on the web at iWineRadio.com. Hey guys, I thank you for listening to iWine Radio, and we are still the only wine channel on iTunes Radio. If you go look under iTunes Radio icon and scroll down to News and Talk Directory, and it's listed alphabetically, click on that and the stream comes up immediately. iWineRadio.com, where you can find links to individual guests. And if anyone's interested in advertising or becoming an underwriter or sponsor, please contact us at iWineRadio.com. We really, really appreciate your support. The more support we get, the more conversations I can have with fascinating people around the world, including you. If you have a story to tell that you'd like to share on iWine Radio, go to iWineRadio.com and contact us, and we'll go from there.